Something deeply disturbing is happening right now at the Department of Justice, and we need to talk about it. Because while the nation was still processing the massive dump of Jeffrey Epstein files that implicate powerful figures in one of the most depraved scandals in modern American history, someone has been quietly making those files disappear. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic midnight purge that would trigger immediate alarm bells. No, this is more insidious than that. This is a systematic, calculated scrubbing operation happening right under our noses in broad daylight, while the media focuses on the latest distraction. Here are the numbers, and they don't lie. Yesterday morning at 9:15 a.m., a search for Donald Trump's name in the publicly available Epstein files returned 1,612 results. By today, that number had dropped to 1,513. That's 199 files, 199 documents containing references to the former and current president that simply vanished overnight. Gone, scrubbed, deleted from public view by the very Department of Justice that's supposed to serve the American people, not protect the powerful from accountability. This isn't a technical glitch. This isn't a database error. This is an active cover-up, and it's happening right now in the opening weeks of an administration that has already shown us exactly who it plans to serve and who it plans to protect. And here's what should terrify every American watching this unfold. If they're willing to do this in public, with researchers and journalists actively monitoring these files, what are they doing behind closed doors? What evidence has already been fed through paper shredders, wiped from hard drives, or locked away in classified vaults where the public will never see it? Let's be absolutely clear about what we're talking about here. The Epstein files aren't some abstract political scandal or Washington power game. These documents detail credible allegations of sexual abuse against minors, trafficking networks that operated for years, and a web of connections between one of the most prolific sex offenders in modern history and some of the most powerful people on the planet. We're talking about billionaire oligarchs, tech titans, political power brokers, and yes, the current occupant of the Oval Office. The names that keep appearing in these documents read like a who's who of Trump's inner circle and financial backers. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who begged for invitations to Epstein's parties. Peter Thiel, the billionaire tech investor who now controls Palantir, the company that has massive government contracts giving it access to vast amounts of American citizens' data, and who has openly stated his belief that democracy is no longer compatible with freedom. Mark Zuckerberg, whose dinner with Epstein was described as wild in emails, now part of the public record. These aren't peripheral figures. These are the men who are actively working to reshape American democracy. And every single one of them has connections to Jeffrey Epstein documented in these files. And here's where this gets truly frightening. These same individuals are now funding political campaigns, controlling social media platforms, and holding positions of enormous influence in an administration that appears determined to dismantle the very institutions designed to hold power accountable. Meta, Zuckerberg's company, just donated $65 million to Republican candidates running in the midterms. That's not political engagement. That's purchasing protection. That's buying silence. That's ensuring that the people who could investigate, who could subpoena, who could demand answers, are instead beholden to the very people who should be under scrutiny. This isn't happening in isolation. What we're witnessing is a coordinated effort to consolidate power and eliminate accountability across multiple fronts simultaneously. While files are being scrubbed at the DOJ, we're also seeing an unprecedented assault on election integrity. Caroline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, recently made a statement that should have been treated as a five-alarm fire by every news organization in the country. When asked whether Trump believes states should oversee their own elections, her response was chilling in its casual authoritarianism. The president believes in the United States Constitution. However, that single word tells you everything you need to know. The Constitution isn't a document you believe in, however. It's not a suggestion. It's not a guideline that you follow except when it's inconvenient.
The president believes in the United States Constitution. However, he believes there has obviously been a lot of fraud and irregularities that have taken place in American elections. And again, voter ID is a highly popular and common sense policy that the president wants to pursue, and he wants to pass legislation to make that happen for all states across the country.
And yet here we have the official spokesperson for the President of the United States saying that yes, Trump believes in the Constitution, but also he believes there's been widespread fraud and irregularities. And therefore the federal government, meaning Trump and his loyalists, should have the power to override state control of elections. This is the playbook. This is how democratic systems are dismantled. You don't announce a coup. You don't tear up the Constitution on day one. Instead, you chip away at it. You create emergencies. You manufacture crises. You claim that the system is broken and that you, the strong leader, are the only one who can fix it. And while you're doing that, you're systematically eliminating the evidence of your own corruption, silencing opposition, and placing loyalists in every position of power. Speaker Mike Johnson, who constantly invokes his Christian faith and claims to have regular conversations with God, stood in front of cameras and lied through his teeth about election integrity. When pressed about Trump's desire to nationalize elections, Johnson claimed the problem was blue states not enforcing election security measures. This is a complete inversion of reality. Red state governors have already indicated their willingness to help Trump undermine legitimate election results. The blue states are the problem precisely because they won't bend the knee. They won't hand over voter rolls. They won't allow federal agents to intimidate voters. They won't cooperate with this authoritarian power grab. Here's the part that should make your blood run cold. In a functioning democracy, when evidence emerges of potential criminal conduct by powerful individuals, investigations follow. Subpoenas are issued, testimony is compelled. The legal system, however imperfect, has mechanisms for accountability. But what happens when the people implicated in the scandal are the same people who control the investigative apparatus? What happens when the Attorney General isn't an independent guardian of the law, but a personal loyalist who has explicitly stated she views her role as protecting the president? Pam Bondi, Trump's attorney general, has already shown her hand. She attempted to extort the governor of Minnesota, offering to pull back ICE operations that have included terrorizing communities, separating families, and conducting raids that look more like military occupations than law enforcement, if the state would simply hand over its voter registration records. This isn't about immigration enforcement. This has never been about immigration enforcement. This is about voter suppression. This is about identifying who voted, how they voted, and ensuring that in future elections, those voters are either too intimidated to show up or their votes can be challenged and thrown out. The ICE operations we're seeing in blue states right now aren't random. They're not responses to legitimate security threats. They're dry runs. They're testing how much they can get away with. They're normalizing the presence of federal agents in communities, near polling places, in areas where people will be voting in 2026 and 2028. And if the public gets used to seeing armed federal agents in the streets, if that becomes the new normal, then when election day comes and those same agents show up near polling places, it won't seem shocking anymore. It'll just be Tuesday. Let's connect these dots because the picture they create is damning. Every single tech billionaire who has bent the knee to Trump, who has donated to his campaigns, who has purchased influence in his administration, appears in the Epstein files. This isn't coincidence. This is leverage. During the campaign, Trump had access to these files. He knew what was in them. And it's not hard to imagine the conversations that must have taken place. Elon, I know you're in these files. Peter, I know what they say about you. Mark, I've seen the emails. You better come to me or it's game over. And they did. They all came. Zuckerberg, who spent years positioning himself as above politics, suddenly became one of Trump's most reliable allies. Musk, who once presented himself as a champion of free speech, has turned X into a propaganda machine for the administration. Thiel, who has openly stated that democracy is incompatible with his vision of freedom, is now in a position to collect data on millions of Americans through government contracts with Palantir. These aren't businessmen engaging in politics. These are oligarchs purchasing protection from accountability. Bernie Sanders said it perfectly. When we talk about authoritarianism, it's not just Donald Trump. It's the billionaires who increasingly control what we see, hear, and read. Musk owns X. Bezos owns the Washington Post. Zuckerberg owns Facebook and Instagram. Larry Ellison has significant control over TikTok. These platforms aren't just businesses. They're the infrastructure of modern communication and information. And they're all controlled by people who appear in the Epstein files, who have every reason to ensure those files don't receive sustained public attention, and who now have the resources to shape the narrative around them. Here's what keeps me up at night. The files that have been released, the ones we've seen, the ones that have been so disturbing and damning, these were released by Trump's DOJ. This is the administration that controls what gets released and what stays hidden. If they were willing to let this information out, even in redacted form, what must the files they're protecting contain? What could be so incriminating, so explosive, so absolutely devastating that even this administration, which has shown zero regard for norms, ethics, or the rule of law, felt the need to scrub it from public view? And here's the other question that deserves an answer. Why didn't the Biden administration release everything? For all the talk about protecting democracy, about returning to norms, about accountability, the Biden DOJ sat on these files for 4 years. They had the evidence. They had the power to release it. They had a moral and legal obligation to the victims to ensure that the full truth came out. And they didn't do it. They left it for Trump to control, to manipulate, to weaponize, or bury as he sees fit. This is the deeper crisis. It's not just that Trump is corrupt. It's that the systems we relied on to check that corruption, to expose it, to hold it accountable, have failed. The previous administration failed. The media has largely failed, choosing to focus on palace intrigue and daily scandals rather than the systematic destruction of democratic accountability. Congress has failed, with Republicans openly embracing authoritarianism and too many Democrats still operating as if we're in normal times, as if norms and procedures and strongly worded letters mean anything to people who have shown they will stop at nothing to consolidate power. Everything we're seeing right now, the ICE raids, the attacks on election integrity, the scrubbing of Epstein files, it's all building toward the 2026 midterms. Trump and his allies know that if Democrats retake the House or Senate, investigations will follow. Subpoenas will be issued, oversight will return. The protection they currently enjoy will evaporate. So they're not going to let that happen. They can't let that happen. The strategy is already clear. Use ICE to terrorize immigrant communities and anyone with brown skin. Make people afraid to go to polling places. Claim that fraud is rampant and use that as justification to send federal agents into Democratic strongholds on Election Day. Challenge results in any district that doesn't go their way. And if all else fails, have state officials in red states simply refuse to certify results they don't like. The Supreme Court, with its conservative supermajority, has already shown its willingness to intervene in elections. Bush versus Gore was the test run. What's coming could make that look quaint. But here's what they're counting on. They're counting on exhaustion. They're counting on people being so overwhelmed by the constant barrage of scandals, lies, and chaos that they just check out. They're counting on voter suppression working not through formal barriers, but through despair, through the sense that none of it matters, that the system is too broken to fix. That's the ultimate goal. Not to defeat opposition, but to convince people that opposition is futile. We cannot let that happen, because here's what recent elections have shown us. When people vote in overwhelming numbers, when turnout is high, when communities organize and mobilize, Republicans lose. We just saw it in Texas, in a district Trump won by 17 points in the previous election. A progressive Democrat came in and won. Not because the district suddenly became liberal, but because people organized, turned out, and voted. The margins of cheating are limited. A close election can be stolen. A landslide cannot. That's why everything we're seeing, the intimidation tactics, the attacks on election integrity, the manufactured crises, it's all designed to keep turnout low. They want you scared. They want you discouraged. They want you to think that your vote doesn't matter, that the system is rigged, that there's no point in participating. But the fact that they're working this hard to suppress the vote tells you everything you need to know about its power. If voting didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so desperately to stop you from doing it. The evidence is overwhelming. The Epstein files reveal a network of corruption and abuse that reaches the highest levels of power. The scrubbing of those files reveals a cover-up happening in real time. The attacks on election integrity reveal an administration that knows it cannot win fair and square, and is therefore determined to ensure that future elections aren't fair and square. And the silence from many of our institutions, the media that should be screaming about this every day, the opposition party that should be treating this as the existential threat it is, that silence is deafening. This story is far from over. More files will be scrubbed. More evidence will disappear. More intimidation tactics will be deployed. The midterms will be a battle unlike anything we've seen in modern American history. What happens in the next 18 months will determine whether the United States remains a democracy or completes its transformation into an oligarchy ruled by men whose names appear in the Epstein files and who have purchased their protection through the corruption of our political system. But here's the thing about cover-ups. They only work if people look away. They only succeed if the public gets distracted, moves on to the next scandal, accepts that this is just how things are now. The moment we refuse to let it go, the moment we demand accountability, the moment we make it impossible for them to memory hole this scandal, that's when the cover-up starts to fail. That's when the walls actually close in. So pay attention to what's disappearing. Share the evidence while it still exists. Screenshot the documents, archive the files, make it impossible for them to pretend this didn't happen. And most importantly, understand that every single tactic they're deploying right now, the intimidation, the suppression, the manufactured chaos, it's all because they know that if people show up to vote in overwhelming numbers, if we make the turnout too big to rig, they lose. The stakes could not be higher. The evidence could not be clearer. The cover-up is already underway, but it's not too late to demand accountability. It's not too late to fight back. It's not too late to save what remains of American democracy. This story isn't over. The next chapter is being written right now, and every single one of us has a role to play in how it ends. Stay informed, stay engaged, stay angry. Because the moment we accept this as normal is the moment we lose everything. The files are disappearing. The evidence is being scrubbed. But the truth remains. And the truth is this: they're scared. They wouldn't be working this hard to cover it up if they weren't. That fear is our power. Don't let them take it away.